we are to the new business action. Our first item is intervention at Glenwood Leadership Academy. Danielle Shockey, Deputy Superintendent, if you would please address and Michelle McGowan. Before you begin, I believe that you have a copy of the actual statute in your materials referring to the decisions that we need to make today. And as I see it, there's going to be a couple of motions that we need to do. And so I'm just going to kind of state those ahead of time, if you don't mind, so it puts it in perspective when we hear the review. A motion that intervention will improve Glenwood Academy and that the board therefore adopts the implementation of school improvement expressed at the public hearing, perhaps. So whatever it is that we do here today, we have several options to consider. So we have to first determine that intervention will improve the school, and what will that be, okay? Then the second then is we may have some further recommendations regarding actual monitoring for that. So the state board shall do the following. We've already held the hearings, but we have options to choose. Merge the school with a nearby school that is in a higher category. Assign a special management team to operate all or part of the school. Accept the department's recommendation for improving the school. D, other options for school improvement expressed at the public hearing, which could also include closing the school. Revising the school's plan in any of the following areas, which would be school procedures and operations, professional development, or intervention for individual teacher administrations. So if the board determines that one of these interventions will improve the school, implement at least one of those options. So that's our first decision today, is to decide what option we're going to choose. With that, Danielle and Michelle.
Yeah. So collaboratively, Michelle and Teresa Brown, our Assistant Superintendent for Outreach, attended the public hearing and heard basically from the publics that they would very much like to retain their leadership role of Glenwood Academy. They would like to continue their plan using Mass Insight as a partner in that work. And our joint recommendation would be for that to remain in place. The principal is here if you'd have any questions for her. But in doing so, a very strong accountability being built between the state board staff member and Teresa Brown and the outreach division to support their work. That would include monthly phone calls with both groups and the principal and the leadership team at that school. That would include 3 to 4 visits here yet in the spring. I can tell you just in the last time, since the hearing, the outreach person has been in the building multiple times, not formally, but every time they do go, they give feedback to the principal on what they're seeing, doing classroom walkthroughs. So the support has already started, but formalizing it through this recommendation would be to allow for Glenwood to retain the work they're doing, continue to work with Mass Insight with greater support and oversight from the state board staff and Department of Outreach for turnaround.
Thank you. So is there a motion that intervention will improve Glenwood Academy and the board therefore adopts the implementation of school improvement expressed at the public hearing, namely to continue the use of Mass Insight?
So moved. Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any more discussion? Roll call, please. I remember to do roll call.
Madam Chairman,
Yes.
I apologize. I feel like I should probably abstain from voting on this since it's my school corporation. If someone else would like a second.
I think you're probably wise. Sarah will second.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
Yes?
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
Yes. Then I heard a second piece presented. Is there a motion to implement the monitoring recommendations set forth by the department and the SBOE staff?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Any more discussion? Roll call, please.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
Yes?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. And thank you to Carrie Yates. Carrie, principal, is she here in the audience? Oh, she was? Just. Well, thank you for attending, though. Thank you. On to the next item, which is the approval of final language to amend 511 IAC 7-33 to align the new federal regulations regarding parental consent for the use of public funds for insurance to pay for special education-related services. And is there a motion to adopt the final language amending 511 1AC 733 to align the new federal regulations regarding parental consent for the use of public funds or insurance to pay for the special education-related services? And you already have the actual rule language before you.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Any more discussion? Roll call, please.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Motion carries. Next item, core link testing window extension, and that is followed by the I-STEP multiple choice testing window extension and the IMAST testing window extension. And Michelle Walker from the department, if you could address all three, that would be great, even though we're going to take them
Absolutely.
separately.
Sure. Thank you, Superintendent Ritz and members of the board. We have before you for your consideration 3 separate, but again, we'll take them all together if that's appropriate for you. Extensions, and I actually want to talk through those a little bit in detail because they do impact turnaround time and return of results dates. The first request is about the I-STEP multiple choice window, which is right now April 28th through May 9th for online and through May 7th for paper pencil. There has been a request from the field to extend that by 2 days. That would make the online window through May 13th, which is a Tuesday, and the paper pencil window through Friday, May 9th. Because for each day we extend the window, including weekends, there is a delay in the return of results. If you look at either the memo or the summary memo that I provided for you, you will notice that from May 25th, the date has changed to May 30th for the return of I-STEP
It's
results.
this document right here that she put before you this morning.
The second request is around IMAST. So again, extending that for 2 more days, which would make Friday, May 9th, the final day of the IMAST window. IMAST results actually are returned right after I-STEP, so you'll notice that the change in dates would be from June 6th to June 11th, again because of the turnaround time based on the business days as well as the weekend days. Because I-STEP multiple choice paper pencil is picked up at the same time as IMAST, so the dates kind of go together. But certainly you can make separate decisions if you choose to. Just want to make sure you were aware of what the extensions would be in terms of the turnaround time. The Core Link extension was also a request, one that actually had an opportunity to talk with several of you about during the public hearings, and I really appreciated your feedback. Again, that decision is before you today. There is no impact on results, as we'll be providing results in the fall for this matrix sampled assessment, so that really is no impact. I also wanted to mention that these extensions are of no cost to the Department of Education with regard to our contract with CTB McGraw-Hill. So really before you today, you have extensions for paper pencil, multiple choice, online multiple choice, IMAST, and Core Link. Are there any questions, or can I explain that in any more detail for you?
Thank you, Michelle. We are
Sure.
going to take them separately,
Sure.
just so that we have clarification for our minutes. Is there a motion to approve extending the testing window for Core Links to May 5 through the 23rd, 2014?
So moved.
Is there a second? Any more discussion? Roll call, please.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. The The next motion, is there a motion to approve extending the test window for I-STEP multiple choice to April 28th to May 13th on the online test and April 28th to May 9 for the paper pencil test?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any more discussion? Roll call, please.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
Yes? Yes.
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 Yes. And the final motion, is there a motion to approve extending the test window for IMAST to April 28th to May 9?
So moved. Second.
Any more discussion? Roll call, please.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
Yes? Yes.
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 Yes. The next item on the agenda
Thank
is the
you.
approval of proposed rule language for SEA 464. Do I hear a motion? To approve a rule language SEA 464.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
Yes? Yes.
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 Yes. The next item of the agenda is board operating procedures. I believe that you all received copies of changes to our procedures. Do I hear a motion to approve?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Any more discussion? Andrea?
Well, I have some discussion. I will make this in the form of a motion, I think, after we discuss the parking lot issues. But I just want to, before we rush on to the next agenda item, I had not realized that when we approved the board operating procedures, that we had deleted the general comment section from the standard agenda. I love the way this morning, by the way, you invited agenda item speakers to speak in the morning so they didn't have to give up their whole day, and I thought that works really well. My concern is that by eliminating general comment, we lose the opportunity to hear ideas about issues that will be coming before us in the future. So at the appropriate time, after we vote on the motion before us, I intend to make a motion to restore general comment section, and I have a specific motion that I'll make at that time.
Well, part of our adoption of the minutes today talk about how changes are made to the actual meeting procedures. So it would be appropriate if we adopt these then to go through that process in order to address that issue. Brad?
I'd just like to offer a couple comments on the motion that's on the table right now with regard to the two remaining parking lot issues. This would represent ending what was left in the parking lot if we were to approve this today. Chris Admonson, who's been working with the small team of department and board, looked at this, and we did some rather extensive work. Michelle did some background work, and I think it's only fair to the board to share with you that one of the things we wrestled with is that Indiana and Oklahoma are unique in that we're the only states where the superintendent chairs the board. So I had some questions from board members individually about the language we settled on for the acting chair, but it mirrors the only one state we could find that's somewhat close. For the most part, many of the states either have an appointed president of their board or an elected from the membership, either appointed by the governor or elected from the membership. So the question was raised. I had Laura send out last night to you a comment just saying that we followed the Oklahoma model. So if that didn't mean anything to you right away, that's what that was getting at, was we actually researched those states, and based on Chris Admonson's advice was to try to align to one, and that's kind of where the team kind of worked from. And I did want to say thanks to Bernice, particularly in the 11th hour, working with us on trying to get that language, and Superintendent Ritzford taking a look at it for us. Thank you for everybody working on that. But that was the background to that.
Any more discussion?
Yes, just on rereading our motion procedures, I guess what I really would like to do is make a motion to modify the motion to include my suggested language. May I share that at this time?
Well, part of what we're adopting today, Andrea, is how we go about actually changing the procedures. And so we've been operating with both the State Board of Education staff and the department staff and a representative from the board to actually come and get together and then come back with recommendations to the board. So to actually amend these on the floor now is not part of how we've been proceeding. And in today's actual approval, we have a committee approach to making further revisions to the procedures. Brad?
I would want to defer to Dr. Freitas because he made the motion, I seconded it, but I would not be willing to amend the motion. I don't know if that's the request, but I'm not in that position to amend. I think that makes a good point.
In respect to my colleague, I would be willing to amend the motion, but since
I won't.
you're unwilling, then I guess it doesn't matter. It's a moot question.
Okay.
So first, we have a motion before us to adopt the meeting procedures as amended and recommended. And we have a second, and we've had some discussion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
I still have
Oh,
a question.
excuse me, we have to roll call, so sorry.
No, I still had a question.
Tony? Oh, go ahead.
Audra, what is it that you are looking to change?
Under public participation at board meetings, I would change number 1 so that it says, "The State Board of Education shall at its regular monthly business meeting accept comment from any interested person," period. Then on number 4, A, statements on agenda items are limited to 5 minutes in length. And then on B, I would replace the public comments language there now with general comments not tied to specific agenda items are limited to 3 minutes in length. My concern was that I'm thinking of Vic Smith and some of the really useful information he's provided during general comments that he would not have the opportunity to share if they weren't directly linked to an agenda item. And I admit I voted for this, but I don't think I was cognizant of what I was doing at the time.
I want to, Madam Superintendent.
Happens to all of us.
Brad?
And I want to clarify, I'm not objecting to amending. I would like to keep it clean. I'd like to deal with the language from the parking lot without dealing with that. I think the actual language that's in front of us in the current motion on the floor gives us a process that if we want to revisit that, we can.
Correct.
I would just say this, it isn't as if we haven't talked about it, but we do have on the website our email addresses, our mailing addresses, and I find, frankly, talking with a lot of constituents, that sometimes is a better format than being limited to 3 minutes here. But it also, part of the reason we talked about that was just to reassure Andrea and others that I want to hear from the general public, but our meetings get so long that what we talked about in December when we said it was by limiting it to the action items on the agenda, it kind of helps keep that at least reasonable. So I just want to make sure I'm clear on that. I'm not objecting to Andrea.
So
just-
Andrea, and
I will
I'll
happily bring the language, I will suggest that the committee that looks at board operating procedures reconsider that.
Well,
later.
well, what I'll do, if we adopt these as now, they go into effect immediately, okay? So I will then entertain, it, because part of what we're approving today says when a majority of the board moves that specific matters in the board operating procedures should be reviewed for possible amendment, an ad hoc committee will be formed, and here's how that will work. So I will entertain you, and we'll see if the majority of the board wants to look at that to be
Thank you.
revised.
So I'll just make a comment. I share your concern on that because I think you limit the speeches by time. You shouldn't limit it by content. If people take time out their day to come here and be heard or something education related, they shouldn't be limited to what we think is important. Maybe they have something that's important that they want us to know about. So I feel the same way you do about that. And also, I don't know if we even address public hearings, but like public hearings should be public hearings. People should come and be able to ask you questions, and you should have to be able to respond. That's part of, I think, the service on the board is you should be accountable to the people for your views and the positions that you take. And I was really uncomfortable, quite frankly, at the standard public hearing, just sitting, and folks can't ask you anything, you can't say anything. That's really not really a public hearing. So anything that could open up to more dialogue and discourse about the work of this board, whether it's what we have on the agenda or otherwise.
So this will come back for discussion.
Yeah, in a moment if we so approve. So we have a motion and a second. Any more discussion on the approval, on the adoption of the meeting procedures? Okay. Roll call, please.
Yes.
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 Yes?
Yes.
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 Yes. So now, Andrea, underneath this topic of board operating procedure, if you would like to make a motion to specifically address public participation at board meetings, then we'll see if we have a majority in agreement to go ahead and make the committee and
So
look
I
at
would
that.
like to move that an ad hoc committee be created to review for possible amendment the public participation at board meetings section to restore general comment time.
Second.
Do we have any discussion? Roll call, please.
Yeah.
Yes.
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 Yes?
Yes.
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 Yes. So the motion carries, and so we will form an ad hoc committee, and I will chair that committee and appoint 2 members from the board. Andrea, you can be one of them. Okay. And then we will proceed, and we'll come back to the board with a recommendation.
Can I make a comment?
Yes, Gordon.
I'm happy with the way the rules are currently drafted. I think it's a reasonable compromise, and although I voted in favor of allowing the ad hoc committee to go forward and consider the issue, generally at this time I'm happy with the rules as drafted.
Do you have a question, Claire?
Would you mind if I address this topic, since I was one of the group that spent a lot of time
You may.
talking about where we got that, and I'm glad to see that we're using our new procedures, but I just wanted to explain how we got there. Chris Amundsen, when she started working with the board in November, she spoke with each member of the board, and this was a consistent theme that our meetings were dragging on for a very long period of time. And she actually helped us by providing information from other states, and it's very common to limit overall public comment to a certain period of time. So that was part of what led to that. In addition, under our procedures, a board member can add a discussion item at any time, including during a meeting. So if you get an email or a phone call from a constituent saying, I really want to talk about XYZ and it's not on the agenda, then you can add that to the agenda, and then they can sign in to speak for that item. So we did actually think about, we don't want to limit general comment, but we also were trying to be mindful of all the feedback from board members about 8 or 9 hour meetings. So I just want to point that out. I think it's great that there's a committee looking into it again. But we did try to think about what if there's a very pressing issue that's not on the agenda. There is still a mechanism for that to be addressed during the meeting.
Thank you, Claire. Is there anyone else who wants to make a comment regarding the topic before we start the committee to address it? Okay. We'll take roll call, please. Oh, we already did that.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah.
We did it. We're on to the next item. Sorry. Claire kind of put me in a different zone there. Final approval of cut score for the core computer education licensure assessment. You'll recall that we had the preliminary cut score given to us, and now we've had our time, and so unless you need Risa to address it, is there a motion to approve the panel-based passing score of 54 as the cut score for the core computer education licensure assessment?
I have one question. I received some correspondence from someone about maybe raising it up to 56. Is the current score reflect something like a 67% correct answer?
Actually, I don't have projected pass rate information on this, and I don't know whether that's some representative. This is Nancy Hahn. She is Indiana representative from Pearson that has worked on
Yeah, remember it went through an entire review process is how they come up with the cut score.
We don't have information right now on what the projected pass rate would be for the assessment.
No, well, I'm not talking predicted pass rate. I'm trying to ask about how many, what percentage of correct
question.
answers.
I want to caution you in looking for a specific percentage, because the standard that was recommended was based on
panel judgments, and they went through an extensive training that took into account the framework for the assessment blueprint, the level of difficulty of the items. So I think you want to be careful in looking for a number for the passing score that's a certain percentage of items.
Yeah, I was just curious if we received something saying what the current level being recommended is only a 67% passage rate with one needed material, 70%. They were advocating for 56 and 54. But in your mind,
I want to caution you about just taking straight percentage of the items, because I'm not sure that once the tests are administered, you're going to, that that's an appropriate way to set a standard for
but the
success.
test score we have, you're satisfied, that's out, we're making sure that we're getting top
Yeah.
performers.
Yes, the process that was used involved approximately 15 Indiana teachers and teacher educators that included educators from 4 of the educator preparation programs, as well as teachers from around the state. They spent an entire day looking at the test items and making those judgments. So the recommendation that we're bringing to you is based on that process.
Because the items themselves differ in difficulty.
Exactly.
That's why it's hard to put a percentage piece on it. Yes, David?
So the number of candidates who actually pass the test is a separate
Is a separate.
matter, because the way we're designing these cut scores is based on a psychometric process of educators giving us feedback. And I think that's an important point that you made this morning. That's why I'm emphasizing it, because as we get these reviews back of so many people passed and so many people didn't pass, the tendency in many states is to then start to adjust the passing score, which Pearson would not recommend, I would assume, and it's not the right way to go about it. If there's any indication that a test is a misfit for us, then we need to go back through the psychometric process and reevaluate it that way, rather than setting public policy based on how many people pass. Would you agree with that?
Yes, and if you were going to choose to make an adjustment and not take the panel recommended score, our recommendation to you would be either to go one standard error of measurement above the panel recommended score, or one standard error of measurement below the panel recommended score.
And those two were presented to you in your information that you received. So one standard deviation above would be 58, and one standard deviation below would be 50.
The board asked us when it approved the bulk of these licensure exams and cut scores last August, asked to have us bring back actual test taker data in a year after the tests had been in place a year for test takers. And so, although this cut score will not be applicable for 6 months from the day from today, if you give final approval, once this test has been taken by Indiana candidates for a year, we will bring back the test taker data so that you can review the pass rates and look at that and decide whether you want to go through another psychometric study to make an adjustment in this cut score.
Any more questions? I think there's a motion and a second on the floor. Well, no, there isn't. Is there a motion to approve the panel-based passing score of 54 as the cut score for the core computer education licensure amendment assessment? Further discussion? Roll call, please.
Yes.
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 Yes?
Yes.
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 Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next item on our agenda is the adoption of the Indiana Academic Standards for Social Studies 2014. We have 2 speakers to speak on standards. Jackie Roten, you have checked several items on standards. If you could go ahead and do your full 5 minutes here, that would be great.
Hello, I'm Tom Brogan. I'm a retired teacher at Center Grove High School. I taught
First,
government.
first is, sorry, first is Jackie Roten.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't hear
That's okay. There she goes. Thank you, Jackie.
Good morning. My name is Jackie Roten, and first off, I want to thank Mrs. Neal and Mr. Walker for the change of the procedure for the public comments. I wrote a note here real quick. It is very important for us to be able to come up and talk to you guys. Sending an email, things like that, that's very convenient, but it doesn't always get the point across. And a lot of times it's not just getting you some information, but everybody else some information, not just one single person. I've come before you guys several times, and I just kind of want to do a little recap. I've attended all the summer study hearings about the Common Core. I attended all the meetings the evaluations panels did on the new standards. I attended all the public hearings that we just had for the Common Core standards, or the new standards that were not the Common Core. I attended the Education Roundtable meeting on February 20th, where they voted for the new social studies standards. And I've attended I've attended 7 of the last 8 State Board of Education meetings. And on February 20th was the first time I had ever heard the social studies standards were being changed. And it was already a done deal. I have checked the State Board's website. Under the news tab, there's no information about it at all. I've checked the DOE website all the way back through January of 2013. It never mentions anything about social studies standards being changed, looked at, reviewed. At the public comments that we had, at the 3 we just had, several individuals they would come up and they would talk, but it was not about a standard. It was because they wanted to give their 2 cents. And that's the first time they had really got a chance to do it. And I agree with Mr. Walker. It's a lot easier if we have some feedback. I mean, I had several questions at the meeting you attended, the 3rd meeting, and I've had questions at the hearings, for this summer study committee. I've never gotten an answer for anything. I went to the evaluation panels. I went to their orientation and the 2 meetings that they had during their workshops. I think I was pretty much one of the only people from just the public that actually was there. And some of them even forgot that I was there, it seemed to be. Because on the last day, on Valentine's Day, K-5 math person was packing up their stuff. 6 through 12 math person came in and said, how did you guys get done so fast? And I will give you a quote. I'll tell you how we finished already. We just took them all as written. So I don't think everything was done like it needed to be. And the new standards, after that meeting, I went straight over to the CECI office and did a request for Freedom of Information Act request for all the information that the panelists were given, to see if it was really what they were given, was what we were told they were given or not. And I don't believe I've gotten all that information quite yet, even though I did receive an email of some of the information. The new standards were released to the public on February 19th after 6 p.m. Public comments started on February the 24th. People have jobs, they have families, they have other commitments. There was not enough time to even look at all the pages. The K-5 math is total of 16 pages long. 6 to 12 is 32 pages. ELA K-5 is 21 pages. ELA 6 through 12 is 29 pages. There was just not enough time. I don't have an educational background or anything, and I tried really hard to understand what they were talking about. And you cannot understand what the standards were meant. So having public comment and having parent comment doesn't mean anything if we can't understand what we're reading. Everybody seems to be they don't want to be inconvenienced and it has to be done right now. It has to be done fast. It has to be done quickly because the next school year is coming, and the only people who are going to suffer for that is our children. And I don't think a proper evaluation of any of this has been done. It's my understanding for the new social studies standards, there's no rules or requirements that the information that is taught is accurate or factual. I understand textbook publishers are to blame, but I feel they need to be held accountable for what they publish. I've also brought this up to people in the state legislature. I have one example for, in a textbook at Lebanon Middle School. They have a section for the 9/11 attack on our country. It's given a half a page.
Thank you
The freedom
very
fighters
much.
were given more than 10 pages, and the terrorists were not considered terrorists. The people who hijacked the planes were not terrorists. They were considered freedom fighters. That's being PC, not politically. It shouldn't be politically correct. It should be accurate and factual. Like the lady said earlier this morning about the civil rights things. They're writing it now as being politically correct, not of what actually happened.
Thank you very much, Jackie. Next, we have Tom Brogan.
I apologize for cutting in front of you. Once again, I'm Tom Brogan, a retired teacher from Center Grove of 40 years in social studies, mostly government and U.S. history. And one of the biggest fears teachers have is teaching the wrong thing. Johnson County had a punch card ballot for voting, and for over 15 years I told them how great the students were, how important the election was by using the punch card, and then the election of 2000 comes around, and I felt like I had to call all the students up and tell them I taught them something wrong. But it's also very reassuring when we teach something right. In 2007, after teaching years and using the text, I was reassured that what I was teaching was what was important for the students. And I went on from that because I found out that content matters. And in social studies, it's an exact discipline. I know English is, and so is science and math. But when you watch Jeopardy, how many columns are set up on figured out math problems? And we do this in all things that we do. It's kind of smug sometimes, but when somebody's talking to us and they get a historical fact wrong, don't you have a feeling inside you catch them on that? Because you know it's important. It's a discipline that has to be exact. Now, some parts of social studies can use concepts, probably econ, maybe geography, but history and government definitely is a fact-important type of subject. And I think that we are trying to make it too, maybe, I guess, friendly for education. We all have a hesitation about learning dates and names and being called on it. And I've heard many parents complain about, oh, my child doesn't know this. And I'm very sympathetic to that. But there are important things in life that we do have to know than the date and the name. And that's important for education to push that, and particularly in history. Now, in this day of technology, I know Google's at our fingertips, and we can always do some searches, and I'm sure that the new standards push that concept. But where do you start the search? Is the search, can you trust the accuracy of the search? And there are some things we just should know. And so I'm just leaving that concept is important, but concept starts with content. And as I said goodbye to many of my students, I like to say it to you, all politics is local, and I think our education should be too. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there a motion to approve and adopt the 2014 social studies standards as recommended by the Indiana Education Roundtable? We're going to discuss during the so is there a motion? Do I have a second? Now discussion?
Okay, because there is some misconception, and I've gotten some emails about it, and I've had some people asking about it. I think because we've been working through the whole process of adopting Common Core, can you hear me?
Adopting
Sorry.
new standards.
Adopting new standards, and were they Common Core, and we've gone through this process, and we have the new Indiana draft standards, and so I just want to address some misconceptions that I've heard so that things are just clarified, or I guess I feel like they are, and then someone else can correct me or add to that. But one of the things that I teach social studies. I teach language arts 4 periods a day, but for 16 years I've taught social studies 1 period a day. And so I always start with my 6th grade standards because I feel like I'm comfortable with them. And so the first thing I did is I printed the new standards and I printed the old standards. And I highlighted the new standards green, everything that matched the old standards. And if you look, in my papers are almost entirely green.
Mhm.
The few words that get changed are things like discuss got changed to analyze, or interpret got changed to compare and contrast. So some minor changes. If I go through each grade level, there are almost about 20 to 25 words that are different from the elementary standards to the middle school standards. So there's this misconception of we've changed the standards and there was something done and this process was kind of sneaky. It's a routine process that the DOE does every 6 years to review them. And so the elementary and middle school standards have changed minimally, in my opinion. I mean, when I look at the difference between it says compare and now it says compare and contrast, that's not, I'll tweak my teaching. Then I said, okay, so I'm going to look at the high school standards. And so I looked at, and they have changed in that the examples that were originally included are now in a separate reference sheet. But again, I went through and I highlighted where the examples, did they disappear? And so I kind of looked, and they're still in here. They're just in the reference document. And to be honest, the reference document offers links to things and offers papers and lesson ideas and stuff. Again, they're still from the examples. And to be honest, as a middle school teacher, I kind of like those links. So if we do anything, I'd like to change and have us have more of the reference type sheet. And so I called Bruce here at the DOE, and he was very nice and helpful. And he said, you know, elementary and middle school teachers many times are teaching multiple subjects. We're teaching language arts, we're teaching science and social studies and math. And so it's handy for those elementary and middle school teachers to have the examples right there. But our high school teachers are specialists, and they are the professionals. We as teachers, I want to be treated as a professional. I need to be given a standard and references and some access to material, but then it's up to me, curriculum is up to local decisions and local control as to how it's taught. And so I just want to say that I feel like this was not a process that was in any way done inappropriately, and it was thorough and fair, and I feel like there has been minimal change, but at the same time what I do see is change in terms of the links and stuff is actually a benefit, especially as like my corporation goes one-to-one and we can now access those materials.
I'd like to add just one little comment in terms of timing, because I think there's some confusion with the public as to we just now did this, which is this process started last year actually, and during the summer was the time for public comment. And then when the roundtable was eventually met, we wanted to give them several, we brought it to the board, we brought it to the roundtable, we wanted to give the roundtable several months to review them. And so we did that, and then now it's coming before us. It would have come before us really sooner, but we actually had January and February meetings. We shortened them. You know, we had some things that got in the way in terms of weather. But we went through the entire process. So public comment and all of that was already happened in the summer, really. And so it's just now coming to an actual approval process. And with that being said, I just wanted to clarify the process that we went through.
Right.
That we didn't just, okay, now let's do social studies, and we did them in a couple of weeks. We've been taking time. Brad?
Yeah, I too appreciate the comments expressed by both Carrie and the superintendent. There has been a lot of confusion, I think, between the department's requirement every 6 years to review standards and this idea that somehow we haven't done that. I distinctly remember sitting here in the fall and having George Frampton speak before this board on this very issue. So I don't know where the confusion lies out there, but I know that I was here. I know you were here. We heard that. So I think somehow in this, as we go through both this process of adopting the social studies standards and we go into the next process as we continue to work on language arts and math, I would just ask that we, of everyone, that when we make comments, that we try to remove emotion and really try to be objective. And when you're objective about it, I think you have to ask the questions: is have we followed our process? And I think the answer is yes. Not everybody will be happy at the end of that process, but we have followed that process. And I think it's really important because the emails I'm getting are accusatorial almost, that the board is railroading this, that we're copying and pasting, that we're not taking the time to evaluate. And I'm not seeing the same thing as a board member, and I don't think other board members are either. I am seeing the scrutiny that needs to happen, and I'm seeing the transparency that I expect to see happen. And so I just appreciate the comments, but I would ask that that we take that time to clarify that, and I appreciate those comments that you've made.
One more clarification, because I've gotten some questions as to why we didn't have hearings regarding the social studies standards. Hearings are not required in the process of standards revision and statute. There's a formal process that we go through, and educators and review, and we bring it to the round table and we bring it to the board. The only requirement for hearings was in 1427 as we were reviewing the language arts and math. It was expressly written that we have 3 hearings regarding the math and the language arts. Andrea?
My concern is not about public comment in regards to the social studies standards process. My concern is the lack of meaningful expert review prior to the standards going to the roundtable. Giving the roundtable a couple more months to look at it is much less important than having those experts who do history standards compare them to the best standards there are, which were Indiana's and which are Indiana's. And at this time, I'd just sort of like to make my statement on the standards that are before us. Indiana's state history standards have long been regarded as leaders in substantive rigor and meaningful guidance for teachers. In 2003, the Fordham Institute's review of state U.S. history standards ranked Indiana first in the nation. Fordham's 2011 study ranked Indiana among the top tier of states. Don't mess with success is a sound adage, yet Indiana has now decided to alter its hitherto successful approach. The results are a needless step backwards. These are the words of historian Jeremy Stern, who evaluated the proposed changes in Indiana's social studies at my request. Stern was the principal author of the Fordham State Reviews that previously ranked Indiana so high. Stern knows our standards as well as any expert in the country, and his professional opinion is that the changes needlessly dilute what our children should know and be able to do in social studies classes. As an 8th grade U.S. history teacher, I agree. The biggest problem is the elimination of rich content examples. History is not like other liberal arts, psychology, for example, or economics, which are conceptual and less content-based. History is the study of past events, which means the standards themselves must reflect the core knowledge we want children to master. In the 8th grade U.S. history course, as one example, key core knowledge is presented inconsistently, downplayed, or omitted. Consider one of the landmark foreign policy statements in U.S. history, the Monroe Doctrine. It has been dropped. The Missouri Compromise, Compromise of 1850, and Kansas-Nebraska Act have been eliminated. You cannot teach the causes of civil war without referring to those 3 pieces of legislation. Likewise, there is no specific reference to the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments. You cannot teach Reconstruction without teaching these Civil War amendments. To do so is to commit educational malpractice, and I might add, I'm sure all good 8th grade U.S. history teachers are teaching that. It's nice to have that support from the standards. Similar problems occur with the high school U.S. history course. The inclusion of specific content is erratic from one period to another. Significant movements and events have been dropped. These include references to the Jazz Age and Harlem Renaissance, the Civil Rights Act and Great Society, the fall of the Berlin Wall, and the First Gulf War. In high school government, key documents are excluded. There is no mention of the Magna Carta, Mayflower Compact, or English Bill of Rights. Also, high school world history and civilization have been dramatically changed, although Stern conducted a limited review and was not able to fully evaluate those changes. Someone should. As Stern acknowledged in his report, the news is not all bad. In a few cases, useful examples have been added. Factual and chronological errors have been corrected. The 4th grade history standards, Indiana history, are as good as ever. In fact, I mentioned at the September board meeting, I thought they were better than ever because of the inclusion of the usefulness of field trips. It's the inconsistency that is my concern, and it could be corrected. When I assign an essay in history class, I give students numerous opportunities to improve their drafts. I call it write and revise. In the business world, this is known as continuous improvement. Any changes we make to our standards documents, especially documents that already have an A- rating, should be targeted at improving the remaining weaknesses, not change for change's sake. I have been assured that a resource guide will make up for some of these deficits. And I think a resource guide, well done, could indeed do so. But to date, we have seen insufficient examples, and the 8th grade U.S. history guide that I have seen does not pass the test, at least not yet. As we approach the state's bicentennial, our goal should be A+ history standards, yet the proposal before us moves us into the B range according to Stern, and could drop us into the C's if the resource guide is not exceptional. Stern notes, Indiana has long been a leader in providing rigorous, substantive content standards for history in its schools. It should not retreat from that worthy educational objective in the name of local control or teacher flexibility. Identifying core historical content places no meaningful constraint on teachers or districts, since unlimited choice of focus or subject matter is not compatible with the study of history itself.
Thank you, Andrea. I will tell you that we did reach out to the Indiana Council for History Education, and they fully supported having examples excluded from the text in the secondary because it's too easy for those actual examples to actually become the standard that you teach, and they fully support our research guide, resource guide. And I do appreciate totally the specific pieces that have to be included as you teach pieces of history. I too am a big lover of social studies and just thoroughly enjoy teaching 5th grade U.S. history. But I think you'll
And
find
those remain excellent.
I think you'll find those. I think you'll find those in the resource pieces, and probably even more extensive than they have been just written in a standard, to include way more pieces that actually pertain to the standard to actually bring emphasis and discussion to the students. So I just want to let you know that we are very sensitive to making sure that educators have what they need at their fingertips, and make sure that we have a good social studies standards so that curriculum can be developed at the local level. Dan, did you have a question?
May I, question. Andrea, thank you for taking the time. Also, Carrie, thank you for the time you've invested in others and the teachers across the state. I think we need to recognize it's easy to lob some people are under the impression that this has been rushed and we haven't put time in on it, but I know too many people that have, and I want to say something to the department and board staff. Lots have been invested, to be honest and open. I wonder, other than a teacher and a department and a school and a district and professional associations that we've reached out to, is there someone in the state that's continuously working with teachers on resources, the kind of things you're talking about, continuous improvement in quality resource insights? Now there's a lot of access with technology now, but what's our understanding of how we keep feeding teachers better and better materials?
Well, I'll tell you from the department standpoint, Bruce Blomberg is in charge of that and making sure that we get information out to the teachers. But he works with all the associations regarding social studies in the state of Indiana. And so that's where we're working with those associations and those entities in conjunction to get the resources prepared. I don't know if you want Bruce to speak to that, but he's been doing quite a bit of work on the resource documents that go along with the standards. Dan, did you need to have Bruce address that?
No, I mean, what I was trying to get to, and I want to make sure because we have a long agenda, but there's a legitimate interest in here in making sure we have
Sure.
continuous improvement, and I was going to try to pick up on Andrea's interest. How do we make sure the right direction and quality and depth is, that we have a good, do we want updates on that, or what's your thoughts on how we would follow through? I just wanted to make it clear who was doing what here.
Oh, and we welcome all input regarding resources, and I think Bruce is totally open to working with Andrea and giving comments.
And Bruce is totally open and has
Sure.
been, and extremely knowledgeable in this area. Should the vote pass, should the motion pass, I would like to suggest the department look at the South Carolina resource guide, which has more specific indicators of the content knowledge that head the resources themselves. So you've got, this guide subsumes the standards, so the standards are listed, then the content indicators, and then the resource links. And so perhaps it'd be one way to look at it, because I think we only have just the 8th grade U.S. History Resource Guide to look at so far.
And I think you're speaking really more to architectural design of how we release the standards and what those look like. Troy?
You know, I want to speak as far as the principal. You know, I've heard many times that they have said that they want the standards to be locally controlled. And I just want to make sure this resource guide needs to be developed and evolved through collaboration within the local district and submitted to the DOE with the examples and become an evolving piece versus a piece that has to be in place right today. And I think we got a lot of great professionals in Indiana that do a lot of great work. And let's reward them with a little bit of time to evaluate the standards and then produce that resource guide with the help of experts and make a real difference for our children. And I think we will.
Thank you very much. Yes, Carrie?
And just to follow that up, and even my emails with Bruce, to assure you, you know, he even said, I'm sending you this, but these are intended to be living documents. Materials will be added and removed on a
Most
regular basis.
definitely.
And so that's the intention, I think, and so to assure you of that.
May I?
Yes, Andrea?
And therein lies some peril. If we are adding and removing items on a regular basis, we're losing the core. This is why I think you could put 100 historians in a room for a U.S. history core standards and wouldn't have a great deal of debate, actually. And so if we have a resource guide that is loaded with lots of examples that do not prioritize the knowledge, then we will lose that very valuable core, and teachers will be worse off rather than better off.
Thank you very much. Any more comment? David?
At a prior meeting, Bruce presented to us, I believe it was in the summer. All I remember was like really nice out in Indianapolis and about 80 degrees, so it had to be July or August, right? And at that meeting, I made a formal request regarding the alignment of our standards with the National Association of Social Studies, and I think Linda remembers. And I don't think I've seen that come about yet. And so before I can vote on it, I'd like to just get some sense of how our standards align with the National Association. Not that we have to duplicate what the national level is doing, but I'm curious how ours fits in.
And I'll be glad to have Bruce address that, but I thought we addressed that already in one of his presentations. But we did go back and look at the national standards, Bruce, and there's very little change in the national approach.
There's benchmarks from
Right.
that were used for 2007, for the most part, are still in place
Correct.
today. The National Center for History Education was contacted. We routinely use the GD organization for geography. We use the Indiana Council for Economic Education routinely, which is the state affiliate of national organizations. So we were trying to touch all the bases to make sure that our proposed Indiana standards met those requirements or those standards from previous benchmarks.
May I ask a question?
So you're saying they are aligned in some way?
Yes.
That what we're doing in Indiana
They
is?
were benchmarked, and there was a I wasn't here in 2007 when those standards were approved by the board, but it appears that there was a lot of work that was done at that time to align standards to Indiana standards to the national standards. The standards themselves have not changed.
Right.
Indiana standards have not changed all that much. The benchmarks have not changed. Therefore, the work that was done in 2007 is still in place for today.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, Dan?
Answer from your professional, you work on this every day. There's two interesting ideas that have to be married here. One is you want living documents, evolving, new materials. then also, and there's a point here made where you don't want to just add stuff and make this long list. You want to make choices because the school year and school day is not unlimited, and we have to stick to standards. So how, from our leadership perch, you have this involvement and evolution and more materials come out. How do we decide what kind of guidance and resources we give vis-a-vis just adding and making the list forever large? Is this a as the board talks about this,
The
how
purpose
is it-
of the resource guide is not to just add as many different kinds of links and resources as I can find. One thing that's different with the resource guide is primary source documents are included. There was no mention of any primary resource documents per se in the 2007 standards. There are lesson plans included from some very reputable sites like Gilder Lehman. Excitement is another great place where you can get lesson plans, and they are all, they attack the issue and provide primary source documents, so you're not just talking about Thomas Jefferson and Alexander Hamilton and how political parties were developed. You're reading some of their actual documents and seeing where they were coming from in the creation of political parties. So it's taking students a step beyond. That's what we're trying to do. As far as how many resources to include in the resource document, I'm just starting this. I don't know that I have a good answer for that. I think it's nice for teachers to have choices. I will say I have a great deal of confidence in social studies teachers. I would like to piggyback on what was said before. They are trained professionals. I was very impressed with the group of 175 reviewers that were part of this process. Their knowledge and their willingness to work on this was just incredible. So I'm confident that Indiana social studies teachers can find the core content in the grade 8 and higher standards through the resource document and not have to rely on examples.
Thank you very much, Bruce. Yes, Tony?
Can I ask a quick question?
You may. You sure?
Bruce, I've had some confusion because I'm not a teacher and regarding the interplay of standards and curriculum. Carrie was giving me a tutorial on this a couple of weeks ago, but I'm still not really clear, particularly as it relates to social studies. I know Andrea said in the past that in social studies, the standards are the curriculum. For me, it's sort of important to balance out between what state standards are, but still giving flexibility to local school districts to decide they want to teach Magna Carta or what may be regionally important. Is there room, in your opinion, in what we have here to free up school districts to still have room to maybe include some of the stuff Andrea's talking about in their curriculum?
There's no question. I took the approach, and I think it's the approach that the department has, that the academic standards provide the framework by which schools and school districts create curriculums. The standards are not the curriculum. You create a curriculum from the standards.
And that's a message that I think we have to get out more, because a lot of the emails I get and the comments on public hearings as it relates to all the standards seem to just totally overlook the fact that
I would
there's
agree with
still
you completely on
locally
that.
controlled curriculum.
Yes.
Or curriculum. Oh, thank you.
Tony, that's accurate. As a teacher who's developed a lot of curriculum.
So
Thank
can
you
I
very
ask
much.
a quick question?
You may.
Bruce, the 175 social studies teachers that that reviewed all these changes and signed off on them, those are all Hoosier teachers,
Absolutely,
correct?
yes.
Okay. And has anyone suggested throughout this process that there would be a, potential reduction in an overall grade for these standards?
May I try to answer that? I think if, let me step back. And Fordham, when they evaluated our standards in their 2011 report, will say that they based their grade not only on the standards but on the examples. They counted the examples as part of the standards. In the review, we were separating the two. If Fordham continues to count examples as standards, which we have not, then a future Fordham report would probably result in a lower grade because we have a philosophical difference on what examples are and the purpose of examples. I don't think, though, that we should be directed by an organization like Fordham when overwhelmingly Hoosier teachers supported removing the examples to a resource document. It was overwhelming.
Andrea?
I must add that one reason Hoosier teachers support removing the examples is because we find ourselves at a place where teachers, due to the pressure put on them from some of our accountability mechanisms, feel they must write their standards on their whiteboards and teach to every standard. But what the language that was in the prior document, and I imagine is in the current, I'd have to look at it, is very clear that this is not exclusive or all-inclusive. And so we need to get the word out to teachers that just because the Harlem Renaissance is in the standard doesn't mean you have to spend 3 days on it. It's an example of one of these movements, one of these cultural movements that would probably be very important to cover, but it doesn't mean you have to write it on your whiteboard. So this, to me, is part of the disconnect that's occurred. But it doesn't remove the fact that certain things like the Monroe Doctrine or the Civil War Amendments or the Ku Klux Klan are non-negotiables. They need to be in the standards in the opinion of I think, historians who do standards evaluations.
Thank you very much. Any more
I
discussion?
need to maybe make one additional point. The Fordham report was just on history standards only. It did not involve any of the other content areas in social studies.
Just one last question. The resource guide will be non-binding on local school districts.
Exactly, yes.
All right, we're ready for the vote. Roll call, please. Yes, we had a motion, a second, and discussion.
Yes.
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 No.
Yes.
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 Yes. Motion carries. Next, we're going to take we have two remaining items under action at this time. So I just want to remind the board what we're going to be doing here. The next item on rulemaking of REPA 3, we're going to take after discussion on REPA 3. So we're going to delay that. And the last item that we added, standard implementation, will be taken after discussion on standards. So we have two items that we're going to take before lunch. Extension of work of the Strategic Planning Committee, and Dan, I think you'll be addressing that, and the creation of the Special Committee on Assessments. So Dan, let's do extension of work on Strategic Planning Committee.
Very simply, the committee's doing great work. Indiana, for the K-12 educational enterprise, not just the State Department, not just the board, but for the enterprise, we'll have clear goals and a strategic direction, leading, lagging indicators. But it's taking a little more time than we thought it would. So this resolution that you have in your packet opens up that the committee will continue to work until we bring it back to the board and it's passed, because we're getting input from the field. It's taking a little longer, but a valuable investment, frankly, of time. So we had originally said we'd be done by February 28th, I believe, and this opens it up to continue our work till it's complete. So I think it's non-controversial.
So we have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Yes.
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 Yes?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. The last item on our agenda before our lunch break is the creation of a special committee on assessments. You have before you a resolution to actually form that committee, special committee chaired by me, the superintendent. Members of the board would be Troy Alberts, Sarah O'Brien, Brad Oliver, Carrie Wicker. And the purpose of the committee is really to begin that assessment dialogue about assessments and look at the RFP process and get that going forward. And make sure that we have some connections with the board on an ongoing basis as to that process. So if I could, I'll make the motion if we could have a second. Any discussion? Yes, David?
I have an amendment to the motion on the composition of the board members. I'd like to add Andrea Neal to the list of board members. Andrea has done great work with assessment, and I really appreciate the thoughtful comments that she makes, and feel that she would add great depth to the people already designated. If she's willing. Are you willing to do it?
I'd be happy to add my disagreeable point of view to all their discussions. Yeah, I'd be happy to do that. Yeah.
Who knows, you might become agreeable.
Andrea?
Second.
Well, you know, I'm going to ask this question first. And we have, and maybe it's, we have 6 people from the board that are currently serving on the strategic planning. So it's okay to have a quorum? Okay, just making sure.
And Andrea would be the 6th.
Yeah, I'm making sure. Okay. Correct. Yeah, I knew that. I just want to make sure I'm not overstepping any bounds in terms of number. So.
Did you get a second, Super?
Yeah.
No, not yet. I was asking a question here first. So, and we have a motion to add Andrea to the committee. Do I have a second?
I did second it, but second again.
Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Yes.
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 Yes?
Yes. Yes.
Yes, and I should have said that I probably accepted that as part of this resolution that I created. So, all right, that will be, so motion carries. Correct?
Well, that was on the amendment.
Technically, that was on
the amendment.
adding.
Yes,
We
yes,
could
yes,
have
yes.
just included it.
Correct, but I could have included it, and that's what my point was. So Andrea is going to be on the committee, and so I guess we'll go back and do the formal
Technically,
motion
yeah.
as well. So, but I could have just done it easier.
That's all right.
So that was
That's all
my
right. You're
point.
just keeping us away from lunch. We're not taking it
That was my
personal.
point. So now, we have a motion to approve the resolution as amended. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, so now, any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Yes.
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 Yes?
Yes.
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 Yes. We will adjourn for, let's see, what do you say? Come back together about 12:35? 12:30? 12:30? Okay, around 12:30, about a 25-minute break here for lunch.
Point of order, Madam Chair, maybe we should recess this.
Oh, recess. Did I adjourn? Oh,
Yes.
I didn't think I did. Pardon me, recess.
Thank you, Tony. We're all getting ready to, getting our keys out.